we can do it, Noel. I knew we could do it.
It's a touching moment. This is the first time that I've actually seen you since. Well, I did see you on Bob Nodel's funeral. You were like on the YouTube screen there, but like
yeah.
this is the first time I've actually talked to you, seeing your face since Dow, I think it was. So
Yeah.
as you guys can tell, this is, Rick and I talk a lot, but obviously this is not something we do often. So, but we figured it out. We're good. Josh, I assume that we're live. We're good. We're being recorded. I'm going to wait for you to.
We're always being recorded.
Oh, recording has started. Okay, we're live. All right. I need to catch my breath here. You feeling good, Rick? Do you need to you need to take a breather, bathroom break, anything like that? Breath of fresh air.
I'm going to the bathroom right now. We're good.
All right. It's going to be a great night, people. With that, I'm not even going to do any opening. We're already live. We're good. So I have here with me my buddy Rick Hummer. And I'll just say really quickly, and I probably do this every single time, but Rick, the first time I met Rick Hummer was at FEIC in Raleigh, North Carolina. And it was a really brief meeting. I mean, we actually have a photograph to document it. Like, I can't remember how it worked out. Like, you just came into the photograph and like Matt Long was there and it was the three of us. And we didn't really even talk at the conference, but it was in a couple months later, early 2018. It was January, February. It's a Sunday, and I'm just doing whatever in my house. I don't remember what I was doing. I was bored out of my mind. And Rick just calls me up. He just calls me up on the phone, and he's like, I'm like, hey, hi. And we talked for like 3 or 4 hours that day or something like that. And and we just kind of blossomed from there, and we started talking more and more. And then, of course, I'd like to point out is that Rick was the guy who at Dallas in 2019, we're standing at the bar, and he comes up to me and he starts talking about, he's like, have you I'm not even going to try to do a Rick impression because he's right here and he can do it better, but he's like, have you ever like looked into like this phenomena where there's these buildings with these basements and there's like doors and windows leading to nowhere and these basements? I'm like, what are you talking about? But he's talking about the mud flood, and he's like, you need to look into this. I'm like, okay, fine, I'll look into it. And then here we are today. So Rick, okay, well, let's just get right into it then. So I gave my introduction.
Hey, real quick, what I was going to tell you is the question I asked was, who builds buildings with basements 3-4 stories down with windows on the exterior walls? I remember asking that. I said, this is what is intrigued me was the buildings.
And I'm like, I don't know.
That's what intrigued me though. That's what made me go, wait, what is going on here? Who would build a building with exterior windows in the basement 3 stories down? Windows up against the dirt in the ground. Who would do that? That's what got my attention to this all the way back in 2018, 19, early 19, I think is when I first started seeing it. Right before the conference, really, if I remember right. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah, I'm sorry. It might be my internet, but we'll get through this. So I was asking the group if you're choppy for them. They say you're good and clear. So maybe it's me. Maybe I'm the choppy one. Let me know. Right. Okay. So it was we were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and it was 7 years ago to the month. It might be to the day. We're not sure. That you and Rob Skiba did your Chicago experiment.
Yeah.
Now, we were originally going to have Rick. He was going to go there to the whereabouts, the beach or whatever, from Lake Michigan, and see if he could basically take us through it again. But the weather was really bad tonight. High winds, cold, cloudy.
It's humid. Yeah, it's humid here. It's really weird. Like it dropped probably 13 degrees in an hour. It's cold. I think we're supposed to get down to 52 tonight. So, but the winds are coming directly from the north. And standing there where Rob and I would have been in New Buffalo, there was I can hardly see the humidity was here. I'll walk outside so you can see this. You might be able to pick it up, but the haze that's going on out here is insane. It's still a little hazy, but here, I'll show you. It's pretty wild. Can you guys hear me?
You're good. I can hear you.
Okay. Okay. So, oh, big old groundhog out here in the field. So I don't know if you can see, but it's real hazy, and that's just a half a mile. Like that house right there is a half a mile from my house. This is a half mile farm field, and you can't see hardly. You can see the gray. Look at the level of gray and the trees back there. That's a whole nother tree line. That's a mile and a half away. So you figure you go 50 miles, you're not going to see anything. 42 miles, 46 miles, you're not going to see anything. So there's no sense in going out there. You wouldn't see it. And it's cold and it's choppy. Look at the sun. Look at the haze on the sun.
So, and that's why Rick is home today. So we didn't have him go out there. And anyways, take us through your memories of that day and anything that stands out to you. And
yeah, man. Just the whole thing was chaotic in the morning. We didn't know if we were going to be able to do it. We prayed about it. We're like, we just hope we can get clear skies. And, both of us talked to our wives right before we left, told them, we're getting ready to head out. And then, like, don't call, we're going to be busy. And when we got picked up at the marina, the first thing that, our captain said was, man, I don't know what's going on, but this is the clearest I've ever seen a June sky in all the years I've done this. He said, you can see the city perfectly, because we told him what we were doing. We told him, we weren't dropping a line in the water. We're just paying the gas basically. And we're chartering the boat. And we're going across the lake with video the whole time so that we could prove that there's not a mirage. That's what the whole test was. It wasn't to prove that Lake Michigan is flat. It proved that the mirage that they try and say is a mirage is not a mirage at all. The city is not coming up over the bend, which essentially it proves there's no curve, which you can get up in the air in a Cessna and fly right along the coast. You can see both sides. You can put something flat up against the window, and you can see that it's Lake Michigan is flat. It is what it is. I mean, yes, it's got some choppy waves, it's got some choppy water, but it's flat. So, like any big body of water. But that's what the whole purpose was to prove that the mirage wasn't real, and we did. We proved that there's no mirage. The mirage didn't come in from behind or anything like that. It was just a straight shot, and we, like I said, the city got bigger as we got closer. That was it.
That video was, there's probably several people in the room that will agree with me. That was probably one of my favorite moments in the modern history of the Flat Earth Awakening. And for a lot of us, we were, I was kind of on the edge of my seat, not knowing which way Rob Skiba was going to go. Because he's it was like, is he going global? I mean, you probably had a very different perspective, being with him personally, but from the distance of watching this on YouTube, I'm like, is he going to go with Globe Earth? Is he going to go with Team Flat Earth? What's going to happen? And I remember when you guys put out that video, and I remember, this very room I'm sitting in now was the room I'm sitting in. I used to have a TV up on this wall, and it was all dark. And I watched that, and I was just misty-eyed. I'm like crying because it was like it's a beautiful moment.
It was real.
And I remember when I wrote that article on that, I had a bunch of, and I said that I cried when I watched the video. I had a bunch of dudes contacting me and said, yeah, you could write in a whole montage of like all the men that were crying across America, because there was a bunch of other guys who they all agreed that they were all, they were just all misty-eyed over that. It was a beautiful moment.
The whole thing was, and we didn't get misty-eyed then because we were just, I knew. I was like, I already knew what was going to happen. That's why my focus was when we came out of the marina. So when Rob could actually see out into the lake before we even came out of the channel, I was making sure that I was watching Rob's face at that time because I knew Rob, as soon as he saw Chicago, I knew it was going to be this. I wanted to see his face. I wanted to see his, the realization of, I'm looking at it across Lake Michigan, and that's exactly what, you know, I got that moment, I got that his perspectives changed immediately. And I'm like, yeah, man, it's over 40 miles across. And so when he started realizing the further that we went out in the lake, there's no mirage. It's flat. He knew I mean, I think he knew it before we even left, obviously. But we had to document the whole thing. We had to show it. I kicked myself so hard for a long time. Let me shut this door. The train's out here insane lately. This
The train
stop.
The train is driving through your half a mile field right now.
Well, no, it's on the other side of it down the way, but it's about a half a mile away. Yeah, it's just insane though how loud they are. So anyway, yeah, when we did the test, obviously when we got back, there was still that thought, does it curve? Does it? No, it was gone. And, a couple of the guys that were, they had big boats out there where Rob and I ate lunch or dinner that night. They had said some things that made him question a few things, but really ultimately, once he got back home and started realizing, once he started leaving that night from that test, or when he was going back to Chicago to catch his flight, he snapped a picture of the Sears Tower, the Willis Tower, and he figured out the distance of what it was. And then he realized how big it was. And that's when he started realizing the magnification process that water particulates have, and air quality is key. It's essential. You have to be able to have the very clear air before you can expect to see anything visibly. And, obviously the human eye can only see so far. That's why the P900 cameras work so well at the beginning. People taking the initiative to go buy these cameras and do the test themselves. That's what really sparked it all. But when we proved there was no mirage, yeah, it was a game changer, obviously, early on. And of course, the censorship started not long after that. I mean, if you remember, we started getting censored. Flat Earth was then referred to as a threat to humanity, I believe, is what the president or the CEO of YouTube said at that time. So when you look at that and you go, a threat to humanity or biggest threat to the world, well, maybe it's the world that you guys have created. Maybe it's the world that you guys want everyone to believe in, and this crumbles it. I mean, it literally just tears it apart. When people come to the realization that water is a natural level, that it finds its own level, it goes level, and 71% of the surface is water. If you can't understand that, the simple principle, and get past the fact that, yeah, you took a bunch of tests as a kid, yeah, you watched a bunch of movies, but I have the full blown I have all the documents of the you want to call it propaganda, but the brainwashing, the indoctrination lessons in a folder. And it was only like 2 weeks of class in 6th grade. So I don't know how much people act like, we know so much, when it's like they were training on, training our brains as early as, before middle school. So I don't know what the fixation is on saying that there's no doubt in anyone's mind, without really looking at the core of the matter, is that no, you've been taught this, you've been trained that, you had to take tests on it. It's a hard pill to swallow, but when you get out there on the water and you look and you realize, wow, it's not a mirage. Even the captain said, no, Lake Michigan's flat. He knew it. Would he ever say he was a flat earther? I doubt it. Is he one today? I don't know. I think it'd be really interesting to go back and find him and get a hold of him and ask him if he ever took any heat for that. But it is what it is. The test was great. It was exactly what we hoped we would get. Was good weather, and we got it. And it was just by far the biggest nail in the coffin for the globe. A 24,901 mile ball that's supposed to have a fall rate of 8 inches times the distance in mileage squared. Didn't happen.
Now, what Rick is, of course, talking about is okay, let me just say what we're doing here, first of all. One of my bonding moments with Rick Hummer and also Rob Skiba was over this experiment. And so to celebrate for the 3-year anniversary of this test, I was living in France at the time, and I'm sitting down in this wine cellar, this old medieval house. And I remember I'm calling Rick up on the phone, and he's talking about it. And then I'd call Rob up on the phone, and he would talk about it. And then I'd talk to Rick again, and then to Rob again. I'm going back and forth, and it was a very intimate experience for me. I never got them at the same time on the phone, which would have been awesome, but I was going back and forth with them. And so before we move on, and so I have a lot of writings. Rick and I have sat down, and he has talked for hours privately with me, where I just like recorded his life, and then I wrote it down. And I have a lot of writings on him, which has not actually gone public yet. It's going to. I'm not threatening you, Rick, but they're going to go public real soon. This isn't like a ransom note or anything like that. But it's just, this guy has lived like a wild life, you know, kind of like your Forrest Gump type of life type of thing. And before we get all into that, I would be curious, because we started out talking about the Chicago experiment and Rob Skiba. What is, it doesn't have to be it could be your favorite memory, but what is one of your pivotal memories of Rob Skiba?
I'm going to say it was the first time hearing I didn't quite capture what it was that he was doing, but I actually happened to tune in to him speaking at a moment where he said that we have to be able to we got to be able to communicate to the young people. We've got to be able to communicate and understand the language of the world, basically. Like, you got to be able to be relevant in some capacity. And in that instant, at that time, I was like looking into so many different things, but the one of them happened to be the Nephilim, the giants. And I had been in contact with Jim Wilhelmsen at that time, L.A. Marzulli, coming out of the radio side of things and television side. I worked in the media. I worked for the dark side, or whatever you want to call it. And when you really want to get the answers, one thing that I learned is you have to go get them yourself. And so one of the things that I really want to do is find these guys that were doing a bunch of research and really pick their brain on some things if they would take the time. And Wilhelmsen was always gracious to me. He always answered everything that I had about the possibilities of a hollow earth, Shoal. The list goes on with any of the underworld stuff, or what's down inside. The other part of that was when Rob mentioned what he was doing then, I realized, he's talking about doing a show. I was so excited. I went running downstairs, and I think I had the laptop in my hand running down the stairs. And I told my wife, I'm like, I got to get a hold of this guy. I want to help him out any way I can with this project. And it wasn't long after that we were in touch with each other. He had put out the thing for the audition. He was going to do an audio drama, and I sent him this thing I worked on at the studio, and he heard it and called me the next morning, and then that was it. We bonded like it's like we grew up together. It was crazy. Missed the guy like you wouldn't believe, but.
And that was for Seed, correct? That was for Seed. Yeah.
That's when we really started working together. And then it was like, I don't know, a year or two later, here comes Flat Earth one day. Rob called me and just said, have you seen any of this stuff being posted on Facebook or YouTube? And I said, yeah, I have actually. And he goes, have you clicked on any of it? And I said, no, I haven't. And I went, why? Is there something to it? And he went, well, I'll never forget the way, and he was lost for words. And so that's when he sent me the links to Mark Sargent's Flat Earth Clues. And I listened to those on a road trip. I had to drive up to Cadillac, Michigan. It was like 3.5 hours. And I'm like, I'll listen to these while I'm driving. And I got, I don't know, third video in, and I was calling Mark. And he, back then he had this phone number at the end of the video. Excuse me. I think he still does. He probably still does. But I called the number, and it was within a few videos later. I didn't get to the last video by any means. He actually called back, and we spoke for probably a good 25, 30 minutes easily on the phone before I got to my destination. But it was just kind of wild that he Rob is the one that opened up the door for me and Flat Earth for me to like be a part of this, because we were already working together on Seed, which has, there's some relevance to this now. I mean, this directly would affect the storyline from what he had at the beginning of Seed, with the whole space thing. So it was just wild how it really just hit the air brakes on us. And we started having these deep conversations, and obviously people turned on Rob. He took his website down the same day that he took the website down was the same day that I had lightning strike in my front yard, on finding the folders, the folder that had all of the information that I had as a kid. This folder from 6th grade shows up in my grandma's garage, and I end up with this box with the folder inside of it that, just the strangest of strange things happens all in the same day. And it was the same day that Rob put up the video, I Don't Care Anymore, the song I Don't Care Anymore by Genesis, because people turned on him just by him saying that he was looking into it, let alone, what happened. And yeah, it was just it was a wild experience. And, like I said, if it wasn't for Rob, I probably wouldn't even be involved in any of this. I would have maybe looked right past it with what I do. I was running a busy life. And, I may have never looked at it. I never laughed at it, though. I didn't laugh at it at all. I thought that would be the craziest thing ever if it was. And one of the things, the reason why I didn't laugh at it is, I'm an artist and I understand, perspective. I understand, the vanishing point and the horizon line and railroad tracks will come together. If you're staring at them, they'll come together, and the same thing with the sky will come down and the ground will go out and everything's eye level, the horizon line. So all that made sense to me anyway. But I was also the guy that had the Rand McNally Road Atlas on my plane rides back and forth to, LA or Riverside or wherever I was going at the time. I would actually look at the map and look out the window and see how far I could see. And it's kind of funny that when I look back, I would do that, just kind of keeping track of where we were before we had TV screens on the back of the planes, the seats in the plane. So there was a lot of things that played into this, and there's so many experiences that you could talk for hours on that. I think everybody could.
Yeah.
So
I, and not to get too much into, flat earth proofs tonight, but it was the same way with me for years, because I, used to be, I talk about this every so often. I used to be a wedding photographer, and I would fly every weekend from LA to Boston, New York, Chicago, DC, Puerto Rico, all over. And I'd get in this airplane and, you're 30,000 feet up or whatever, and you're looking down at the earth. And I would look down there obsessed at the fact that I would just be amazed at how the earth would keep rising and rising and rising. And yeah. I would always think about this. I would go ask people this question, and they would look at me like, what are you talking about? But I would be like, okay, the earth is spinning, right? So why is the earth not spinning below us? And why are we like, why are we just going with the, like it should be going, in a Western, you just kind of, whatever. I mean, you should just go.
Westward bound flights were different than eastbound flights, but not by much in time. And they should be way different in time if the Earth is spinning. And,
right.
The whole science part of that. The important thing called science.
Yeah. My point is that, when the flat earth came along, it just made sense to me, because these are the questions I was asking my entire life. Now, this is your show tonight, and you're going to be talking tonight, but I have to say this while we're on the subject of Rob Skiba, and then we're going to jump on, is I asked you your favorite memory of him. I have many favorite memories too, but I think my favorite is because, just like you, Rick, where I would turn on the recorder and you would just talk into it. I did the same thing with Rob for a while, and he would just, when he was done with work for the day, he would call me up. You're like, hey, I got like an hour. I'm like, okay. So I would just hit the recorder, and he would call me up and just start talking about his life. And I think my favorite moment was when he started talking about how he played Dave on Alvin and the Chipmunks on the nationwide tour. And I had to stop him. I'm like, wait a second. You were in Alvin and the Chipmunks? He's like, yeah, I played Dave. And I'm like, are you kidding? I love that show as a kid, right? Like, I loved Alvin the Chipmunk. And I said, can you do like a Dave impression? And so he started screaming, Alvin. And I was like just nerding out, because here I have a private audience on the phone with Dave, and he's doing a David. Yeah. So That was my
Right.
favorite, I think, Rob Skiba moment. But anyway, so before I'm going to have you touch on all different aspects of your life. But before we get too far into it, because I didn't want to forget this tonight, is talk about your Rolan Reddy movie, and you could take us through it. I would like to hear anything on it, like maybe how it got started, maybe stories involved. But just so everybody knows the context up front is that this is a movie that Rick, how you filmed most of it. It's almost all done. Like there's like what 15 minutes left.
No, 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 no. We didn't film most of it. We have no. Here's what I will tell you, and just to be fair, it's been put on hold for good reason. We started filming this. I started doing this as a project that Rob and I were going to do together, and I mean the sign is hanging up in my garage still. It's right there. So it's kind of crazy. You can see the sign. That was part of what we were doing. And it was something that I came up with, an idea that I came up with that Rob could do on green screen. And this was before Flat Earth. So when Flat Earth hit, I totally changed so much of where the direction was going with all this stuff that I had already put this work into. And at that point in time, I knew, and plus Rob and I were working on Seed. I knew that I had to really bust through this. And at that point in time, when I say bust through this, I was talking about Flat Earth. I thought, oh, this is gonna be really easy. It's all gonna be revealed. Everyone's gonna get it because it came so easy, to me. I didn't struggle with it. I really didn't. Once I'm like, well, wait a minute, water's a natural level. I can see Chicago, and that's the whole thing. As I told Rob, but going back to this thing, I guess what got me was with the movie is I thought there's a way to tie all this into this character that I had been doing prior to even knowing Rob. That was the other thing. This character was something I was doing. The first time I met Rob in person, I was actually dressed up as Rolan Reddy at a stunt show down in Texas. So it was kind of funny that that's how when he arrived, I was already in costume, and I went up to him and he didn't recognize me right away. That might be my favorite moment because that was the first time we actually physically met. I was actually in costume for doing this stunt thing with my buddy Calvin. And so anyway, but yeah, and I have a lot, by the way, in all fairness, I have a lot of favorite moments with Rob. The first one would be that I actually, that I discovered there's people out there that are doing stuff. And it just so happened to be Rob Skiba that was just really wholeheartedly that I gravitated towards just because of what we are both into. And, God, I still believe it's like God brought us together as bros, as buddies to not just hang out, but to kind of be there to encourage each other and kind of lift each other up when one would get discouraged about stuff. Um, that's how I always viewed like we were kind of brought together at a time where we both kind of needed some uplifting and some motivation and encouragement. So that's kind of what I look at that. And so with the movie, Rob was all about it. He couldn't really do a whole lot except play himself. And that was something that we had talked about. So there were so many different angles at the beginning of this because it was also fresh and also new. And I didn't have a cinematic camera. I didn't have the equipment. And I really thought it would be more fun to actually record all of these experiences and going up and finding people and talking to people with an actual handy cam, like a Sony handy cam on a selfie stick. And that's really what happened. I had a real true, I was getting footage with a Sony Handycam, and I'd have to bring the stick down and hit the button and then push it back up and flip the little lens so I could see what was going on. And that's how it all started. It was going to be more of like a little YouTube channel. And then the more we started talking about it, we were like, this needs to be a feature film, but I need B-roll, I need footage, I got to have all this stuff. So I started collecting and gathering the journey, the actual true journey. So a lot of it was filmed in real time of what this character would go through, ending up at a conference, ending up talking to people that believed it, debating people, getting into arguments with people. So there's a lot of B-roll footage that people have never seen. If anybody was at any of these conferences, they will remember that I was in costume and I was walking around with camera, and there is a lot of great video, a lot of great conversation it's part of the story. And there's a way to do this cinematically with that old footage, that vintage footage, if you want to call it that. It seems like it's vintage now. Um, that even in that medium, in that format, that it would look just fine because it's authentic, it's raw, it's real. And obviously, I don't look the same age as I did 7 years ago. The people are getting older. People that are on camera from 7 years ago or whatever. With what was the first time we actually started doing this stuff? I guess it would be 7 years. We did the test 7 years. I guess when did you become a flat earther, Noel? 15, 16?
I was May of 2016.
So that's about, I think that's the same year as me.
No, you would have
So
been 20. You were 2015.
15. Yeah. Man, see, I'm losing it. So
You
anyway,
were
yeah.
you were April, I believe, April 2015.
Yes. It would have been tax time, tax season. Same time, because it was that night that Rob had that. He called me that same night when he heard Canary Cry Radio. That's when he called me.
See, I should just be your official biographer because when you have questions about your life, just ask me and I'll tell you the date.
That's great. But yeah, what it was April. It was tax day because I know Rob was doing taxes. He had to drive somewhere,
Well,
and
I
then he
know
called
that.
me that night.
Yeah,
And
I know
that's
that.
when Flat Earth was brought into my head. Like, what? The same
Yeah,
night.
I believe Mark Sargent did Flat Earth Clues. I think it was like March. So it could have been March, but it was March into April of 2015.
Well,
And
no, the
that's when.
first thing that Rob had me listen to was that Canary Cry interview. That was what I listened to first. I listened to that interview that he heard of Mark talking to them, I believe, or talking about it. But yeah, but then Rob sent me the Flat Earth Clues, and I listened to that the next day when I was driving. So yeah, it was all a whirlwind. It all happened so fast, and immediately I was thinking about Chicago. I'm like, well, I've seen Chicago across Lake Michigan. What's the formula? The building should be behind the water, shouldn't it? And my brain started thinking that way three-dimensionally immediately because that's just I've seen Lake Michigan my whole life, going to Lake Michigan, and it's on clear days, on days that there's clean air, you can see Chicago. If there's a lot of humidity, you're not going to see it. If there's a rain shower coming down between you and Chicago, 50 miles away, you're not going to see it. It becomes a curtain, And Chicago is not real big. In grand scheme of things, if you're everyone's screen that sees me, if this was your full screen for your camera or whatever, your eyes. Chicago's only sticking up about this far off the water with everything that you can see peripheral with your eyes. It's really tiny. Barely anything. So when you see it, it's one thing. But some days, that's what I was getting at. Back to this, Noel, the experiment. I was telling Rob before we got there, I said some days Chicago looks a lot closer than it is because I believe it's being magnified, in the air. Something's happening. And that's why they think that there's a mirage, because it does change. And some days it can be squiggly. Like you can be looking at it looks like the Sears Tower is doing this. And that's all the humidity. That's the different patterns of wind and all that in the air. So it's giving you this crazy effect. It's like looking through stained glass almost, warped look. So anyway, I forgot the question.
Well, we were talking about Rolan Reddy.
Yes. So going back to that. Yeah. So the story developed over time. We started putting together an idea for it, and before I knew it, I had told some people that we're working on a feature film for this, and I let somebody talk me into like putting together a trailer for it before we were even close to having it shot. And if we were going to do it, we were going to do it the right way. I wanted to do it cinematically, not just on that handy cam. And the original idea was I was just going to do like a YouTube channel, just do videos every now and then, and stay busy and go. But once I started putting the storyline together, I started realizing I could take part of my story of my life, some other people's stories that I knew from Flat Earth, put some of all of our experiences together, and start putting what I knew with my life in LA and the things I experienced. I thought this is the perfect storyline for Rolan Reddy, who's got he's got the opportunity to do the stunt of a lifetime called the Big Bang. And he's going to be the first guy to do a stunt in space. And he's got this amazing, podcast TV show, whatever you want to call it, kind of like what Stern had going on, the original podcast, if you want to call it that, where people were watching it and watching a guy do radio, when I look back at that, I was like, this is exactly what, I can write this out easily because it's what I know. And it's a no brainer for me to slap the teeth in do the character. The character's based off people that I know. It's also based off a little bit of what I've experienced, being around in the show business side of things, living in LA as long as I did, and lived there just long enough to get out and figure out what in the world is going on. It's a sick place. But when I put the whole screenplay together, I was like, you know what? There's more to this. And Andrew Lankus, a friend of Yahweh, he and I started talking, and another buddy of mine started talking, and we started figuring out that we could easily shoot this and get this thing together and make it happen if we did this in little bits and pieces and just did it on our own budget and tried to get this thing done on our own time and on our own dime. Well, we were doing that. We shot during a 4th of July parade. Mark Sargent flew into town. I had him come in and stay. Uh, had a group of guys come up, John Pounders, John Hall. They came up, helped out with the set with the crew. A bunch of my buddies jumped in to help out, to do sound, to do special effects with confetti. That it was a blooper, but then it actually ended up working out better because the wind picked up and had it going in the air. It was fun. There was a lot of fun involved, but we shot it cinematically. We shot it on a Raven Red. We've got great footage of Mark and I cruising around in a 1981 Trans Am, having this great conversation. And next to it's like something off of On Golden Pond, where they're having this conversation about level and properties of water. Not to mention, like I said, I've got all this footage of Bob Nodell and Rob talking with Rolan Reddy in one-to-one interviews with the old cameras and cell phone footage that just looks raw. Um, uh, the fun stuff, the stunt stuff that we had before Flat Earth came along. There's real, true stunts going on. There's real, true, if you want to say jackass type stuff going on. It's real. Um, so it ties in perfectly to this character. That's the whole point. But we wanted to make the character likable, and so Andrew and I started really putting our heads together, and we did phone conversations, and we recorded phone conversations. And before I knew it, he was actually putting together the screenplay, the actual true script, not just my notes and everything that I was putting together. I mean, this is a full blown script form, ready to go. And we were already filming, and we had filmed a game show sequence with Roland, with Mark Sargent as a game show host, David Weiss as a contestant, Jaron Campanella as a contestant. Roland Reddy gets sucked into this game show as the celebrity guest, and it crumbles his world. There's a whole awakening process, but it goes from the beginning of Roland's life, from a baby boy, from the time that the indoctrination starts in all of us, or some of us, just like it did with me. I mean, I wasn't even in second grade before Star Wars came out, so I was like the prime kid that like action figures. Um, I was the kid that got all three generations of action figures, and it was still okay to maybe get some action figures of Return of the Jedi, but not much more, or you weren't going to be a cool kid. And so I got the Star Wars Empire Strikes Back in that. So that whole thought process with Roland Reddy even came into mind, of the indoctrination and how all that came into play. But it also comes into play that you can't help but to love the kid as he's growing up, because he actually goes through losing his father early on, and it shapes and changes his world. But his dad plants a certain seed in him as a young child. And those were some of the memories that he has of his dad. So that's what the whole Roland Reddy process is. So as far as us shooting, we were scheduled to shoot in Mexico in April of 2020. And obviously, what happened with that. Everything got canceled. And at that point in time, once that all kicked in, so much happened in everyone's personal lives. It's hard because Andrew's all the way down in Austin, Texas. I'm in northern Indiana. Our camera guy's down in Louisville. Some of our other crew and staff that we know that we'd have to use, and everybody in the movie, as far as the people that we wanted to use, none of them were here locally in northern Indiana. So it became a really big task to actually try and do a feature film. And a lot of people lost interest, it seemed. A lot of people just didn't want to, they couldn't travel. You couldn't do anything. And I know a lot of people just went through a transition. The last thing that was ever shot for the movie was we were back in doing some side production stuff, picking up more B-roll, and we shot a scene with Rob at the conference, at the Take On the World conference, just before we left, before we all got sick. And so the very last thing that I've ever shot was with Rob for the project. So yeah, we put it on hold till we can all get together the right way and figure out how this is going. But the funny thing is that because of COVID, it's kind of changed the storyline a little bit to make some other things relevant. It's kind of interesting. If we could get back on it, it would actually bring in the entire connecting so many dots for Rolan with the questions that he had, just because of what's happened since COVID and all the things that are lining up geopolitically, and you know what's going on. I mean, it is what it is with the injections and everything else.
I remember the game show with Mark Sargent and Jaron that was filmed in Dallas at the Flat Earth Conference in 2019. And then, so what? If you don't mind my asking, like, if you were to finish this movie, what would be left? What needs to happen for you, like in terms of like footage you need to shoot or
Flashback
whatever?
scenes, the younger stuff, the prior to I would say elementary school stuff. Baby, there's a baby scene, obviously the nursery, the opening scene. There's little things like that. The funny thing is, we can sit down and we can have. It doesn't take many takes with us. That's the one thing, is the group that I've worked with on this. It doesn't take a bunch of takes. Like, we were able to go through the parade and do everything we needed to do through the parade. And we went through the parade twice. The town let us go through the parade twice. They moved the fire trucks back in line. They moved the Harleys that led the way, the bikers that led the way. Everyone got in line. Everyone was very patient at the parade. And we got everything that we needed in 2 takes. And the reason why we did 2 takes is one was aerial with the drone and one was on the ground with the camera. So when we did the shooting at the conference in 2019 in Dallas, the game show, we got all that done. I was surprised at how quickly we were able to fly through that, as quickly as we did. Did it come out good? It came out great. We knew it was going to be, it's not the main part of the movie. It's just part of the movie. It's part of where it really takes a turn. That's a very essential part of the movie, with having David and Jaron as these contestants playing against this guy that doesn't believe. This guy thinks he's going to go to space. He thinks he's going to do all this stuff. And I'm giving away a bunch of the movie, but Mark being the game show host, it's actually funny considering what Mark's position was in the movie. His character is just who Mark Sargent is. It's like, you don't know how to take the guy. Rolan didn't. He didn't understand it. So there's a lot of play there. And it's funny to be able to use people that are actually in the movement, people that have been, speakers and active. I mean, look at these guys are still very active in it today. And look how long ago that was shot. So you look at that and go, it's a time capsule. That's the biggest part about this is, so it's almost like it's a long form documentary / movie, docudrama, so to speak. So yeah, I'm excited to continue, but we're also working on something else that what you and I had spoke about was kind of doing something different. I really don't want to talk about this project at all. I don't want anybody to know about this project yet until it's a full blown, let's go and greenlight it and make it happen. Because this would be a lot simpler to produce at this point in time while we're kind of waiting to see what happens. Plus we have, we needed a budget. Paul and the Plane came on the board with the Rolan Reddy project, not even batting an eye, like, I'm in. And then COVID hit. And so I owe a lot of thanks to people, but I also know that I hope people realize how much work was done already on it. So yes, I have high hopes that it will get completed. When it's time, it will. When the time is right, it will. And I do believe that with everything that I've got already in the can and ready to go. Yeah, it would be spectacular to finish it, especially with the storyline, especially with the people that could help consult on some of the things and the opportunities that we have to shoot. I've got access to an incredible array of vehicles, from guys that have hot rods from the 70s to today's, fastest cars you can find, to a buddy of mine that's still doing stunts. So there's so much that can be done and needs to be done, but at the same time, it's just getting everybody on the same page and going. I'm ready. I'm ready to go. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Yeah.
I'm rolling to ready.
So in the 5 to 6 years, 5 plus years, 6 years that Rick and I have been talking, almost every single time that we talk on the phone, it's Rolan Reddy comes up. And so this is something that I know that is very dear to Rick, and he's passionate about. And for those of you like who followed Skiba, you know that Seed was his baby that he was always trying to get off the ground. And so this is something very similar. And I told Rick about a month ago or something like that. I'm like you need to get this done. Like, what do we need to do to get this done? And I would love to see it, because I've heard you guys hear him talk about it. I've heard him talking about this for the last 6 years now, and I haven't seen it myself. So you'll have to invite me to the premiere, Rick. And I'd love to.
Definitely. Well, of course.
And the after party. You got to invite me to the after party too. So I know it's like I know it's really uncool to invite yourself to the after party. I probably just disqualified myself from going to the after party. But all right, so take us, because as I was telling everyone, or I was saying earlier, I've done a lot of work with you. Going through your life and your time in Hollywood. That's probably going to be a first time for a lot of the people here, and they would love to hear just your journey, where you came from, like in the 90s, being a DJ and so on and so forth. So just take us through it and regale us with your wisdom and your stories.
What part? There's so many avenues that we could go down on that.
Well, tell us about your time in Hollywood. I mean, we can talk about whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah. No, okay. So I was going to school. I was going to college. I had an opportunity to get an internship with a radio station in Indianapolis, and it was a natural fit for me. I was able to jump in. I was always a prank phone caller growing up. I was the kid that had the cassette recorder with the suction cup microphone on the phone. Before Jerky Boys, we were actually doing this and recording these phone calls. And back then, you couldn't get caught. There was no caller ID. It was just the greatest thing ever. And we had all these cassette tapes labeled with stuff that we were doing. So I could do voices. I could do that. So getting into radio and having to produce commercials and write commercials and do phoners and read the news and do the weather, all that was it was easy for me. So I got into that, and once I landed my first full-time gig, I wasn't even in radio full-time before I was in LA. I went from my first full-time gig in radio was in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and from there I went to a station in Riverside, California, called KGGI. And I was only there, I think, 2 months. And the program director that had left the station just before I got there, the new program director is the one that hired me. He had to hire a new team, and so he hired me. I didn't know the guy. I went out for the visit, did the, if you want to call it an audition or whatever. Never even went on the air. Actually, we just hung out, and he hired me. And then the guy that had left was starting up a new station in LA. They were flipping formats, and his girlfriend still worked for the radio station and said, "You should hear the new night guy at KGGI." And he ended up making a phone call to me and said, "Send me your tape tonight." He was listening and said, "Send me your tape." And he said, "Better yet, why don't you hand deliver it tomorrow? You can make it back to your office if you want to, but bring it over to us in LA." And so I drove to Burbank the next day and dropped off the tape and met with the guys and clicked with them. Thought they were really cool. Realized these guys, they're just like me. They like doing radio. They came up, from the lower markets and worked their way up. And I ended up going to work for them in LA. I left my job in KGGI and I ended up in Burbank. I ended up, working on Olive Avenue, right next door to the Warner lot. My window looked out my studio. When I was on the air, my studio would look out the window, and I would look at the water tower straight across from me on the Warner lot, like from the Animaniacs. The water tower was in there. That water tower was out my window. So I mean, you talk about being right in the heart of things. And then my roommate worked for Universal Studios. The guy that I ended up getting hooked up with through a friend, not long after I was on the air in LA, we had a mutual friend that hooked us up, and he needed a roommate. I was looking for a place, and he had ties to Indiana, and his mom and I were both from Indiana, and it was just like this weird thing. And I went out to his place, which was a lot further than I wanted to drive every day, but it was Reseda. So I'm thinking, Reseda, that's where the Karate Kid lived. Okay, this is getting cooler by the minute. I'm gonna go live where the Karate Kid lived until I got to Reseda. So Reseda was all about. It was all good. No offense to anybody in Reseda, but I moved into this place over on Yolanda Avenue with my buddy EJ, and we ended up getting the pool fixed in the backyard. We fixed this place up. We had cheap rent, and we were living like kings. And I think I was just turned 21, 22 years old. And so here we were. Both of us had these dream jobs. He was the head of TV development for Universal Studios. So anybody that was coming in and out of Universal Studios, if they needed anything, he was the guy to go to. He was the logistics guy, part of the team, and knew everything that was coming in and out of every production. So he knew all this inside information about everything. He knew what it would take to do production. So it was all this great insight that I had never had. And so anyway, long story short, I started doing radio, and not long after I was there doing my show, my program director came in and said, what do you think about working with a co-host and doing another show after your show at night? And I didn't know what he was talking about. And then it was, he's like, well, let's go to lunch. And I remember we walked down to this awesome little Mexican joint that had the greatest food ever. And on the way there, he was like, what do you think of working with Shaka Khan at night? And I looked at him, I said, are you being serious? He's like, yeah. I said, that's weird because I just heard her doing the interview the other day on the radio, and I thought she sounded really good. She's got a great voice, obviously, we know that. But she sounded good on the radio, like really natural, just having conversation. I was like, yeah. And it was weird. So I was in LA less than 2 months. I was in LA after getting to California. I was working in LA, I think, like not even 2.5 months in. And then within 2 months of me being there, not even 2 months of me working there, Shaka came on and joined the staff and was part of the show, part of the other show. So I had my show, and then I did a show with her. And and we did that for, however many, it was a year and something, almost 2 years, probably close to it, that we did that, I think, if I remember right. It was just maybe just shy before she realized she got out of a record deal with Reprise, and she wanted to go record a new record. And instead of signing a big healthy contract with MJI, we had traveled to New York and met with them. We had a syndication deal on the line that would have gone nationwide with the MJI. Kind of like Delilah at night. There's a syndicated show called Delilah, but it was similar to that. Our show was similar to that, but not really, but syndicated like that. And it didn't fly. It didn't go because the day that we were supposed to sign, she signed. She got out of her record deal with Reprise Records and immediately booked a flight to um, Prince's place in Minnesota. So she went to his place to record some album, and she left the radio thing sitting on the table and was like, nope, I'm not doing it. And shortly thereafter that I left radio, I started getting into doing storyboards, and I was actually wanting to break it in and doing stunts, and getting more into the production side on that side of things. And I was doing voiceover work. And that was it. I got out of radio. The station I worked for was also changing formats, and I got wind of that. So it was time to go, and I started doing some things differently. And then that's when once I got out of radio, I had seen some things, but nothing crazy. But just as I kind of started making my decision to get out of radio is when I started realizing how weird LA was, because I didn't go out all the time. I wasn't going out and partying and going here and going there. I had access to go hang out at Universal Studios back lot and, go sit on the side of the mountain, look out over the lights. I'd rather do that than be at a nightclub. I was never really I didn't want to go to the clubs out there. It was a different world early on. I would go to those places when I had to, like if I was paid to be there, like for a remote, but it wasn't what I wanted to go do. I didn't want to go. I wasn't into the music. I wasn't into the big raving house music, and it wasn't cool to listen to Leonard Skinner back then, I guess. My favorite radio station in LA when I lived there was Arrow 93.1. Anybody that lived in LA in the 90s will remember that station. It was and they were a competitive station. They were KABC, I think. So yeah, it's been a weird journey, dude. I mean,
Well,
when I look back, a whole different world.
this is going to bother me to the day I die. That because I was in just outside of Los Angeles, Hollywood. That I was in Los Angeles back then when you were on the radio, and so late at night I would sit in my room and I had
That's
like
crazy.
I had the turn dial right on the radio, and I'd go through and listen to all of them, and it's going to bother me to the day I die. Did I listen to Rick and on the radio late at night?
Well, it was
And Shaka.
100.3 W or KIBB. Almost said WIBB. KIBB. It was 100.3, and it was CBS Radio or Infinity or whatever. Not Infinity, but Viacom.
I passed 100 all the time. I'd go to 101.1, which was was it the oldies, and then you go to like what was K Rock? That was
K Rock was 98.7. Was it?
That's right. So, and then I would go to Kiss.
98.7 was Star 98.7.
Oh, yeah, there was Star 90.7. There was Kiss FM. There was K Rock. There was. And then there was whatever. So, but I would be right past there.
99.1 KGGI was my original station in California. That was the original. That was the one in Riverside. That was KGGI. 99.1 KGGI. And
this has nothing to do with you, Rick, but I'm just going to put this out there for anyone listening that you had Mission Reseda. And yeah. I'm getting ready I'm working with Adam Fink right now to publish the interview I did with him. And a lot of people don't know this because everyone thinks of Adam Fink from Parable of the Vineyard that he's like this Missouri guy. He actually grew up in Encino. So,
wow.
Yeah, so it's kind of funny that, just north and south of Beverly Hills, he and I grew up. But anyways, so you're on the WB lot. Tell us a little bit about your escapades in Universal with your roommate. Tell us about your.
I can't say some of it. I just can't. It was 20s, and it's a whole different world now. But
before you get too far into this, tell us about on the WB lot as well. When you would
Warner lot. Oh, Warner lot. Okay, so how that happened?
That's a little bit less controversial, I think.
Well, yeah. No, it's all good. No, it's none of it's really bad. It's just we did things at the Universal lot I should not have done. We could have gotten hurt, really hurt doing some of the stuff that we were doing. But anyway, yeah. So here's how all this worked out for me was once I landed in LA, once I was there working, once Shaka came on board, Rosie O'Donnell she came out to do her show, the Rosie Show at Universal Studios Hollywood. Upon coming out there, the girl that booked Shaka she and I became friends because we had to be in touch because I was also not just the host. I was a one-man show for Shaka, and I was the producer and the host. Whereas for my show, I had a producer, but she didn't want to work with anybody. So I was the producer plus the host. So it was a no-brainer. I kind of did both, or my guy kind of did both shows. So the girl that booked us as talent, though, when I met her at the taping, she had me set up in a whole different section. So Shaka got wheeled off to go talk with Rosie. Then they put me over here in another section, and then they showed me right where my seat was, which was right in the front when they did the show. So when the show ended, Susan said, "Hey, we're going to go and hang out. You guys should come out afterwards." And I'm like, "Oh, no, we don't go out afterwards." And they showed up at the radio station. They showed up at Dalt's Bar and Grill, which was at the bottom of our radio station. And the whole crew from Rosie's crew were there. So when we were leaving work, they were right there when we were walking out in the lobby. We're like, "Oh my gosh, there's those guys." And they're like, "Oh yeah." Well, it was right next door to the Warner lot, which they came to the following year. So that's how I ended up on the Warner lot, was when they came into town. Naturally, Shaka was invited back over the show. I went back over there, and while we were there and while they were cleaning up after the show was wrapped, it was the wrap party, they were packing up their gear. And some of the guys that were done from New York, they had been playing basketball all week over at the lot, on the lot. And they were talking about how it's the smaller court, but there's no wind. It was great. I'm like, "Oh, wow, that's cool." And Susan said, "You ought to go over there with them and play. Don't you always have stuff in your car?" I'm like, "I do. I always had like basketball gear or something in my car, beach stuff. I always had it in my trunk living in California. You never know what you're going to do." And I had my stuff, and I went over and played. And before I knew it, I'm sitting there playing like 2 or 3 games, games to like 11 straight, and somebody's sending me something. Okay, so sorry. So I went down to this court, and then like 2 or 3 games in, playing to 11 straight, uh, I realize I'm guarding Clooney. I've been guarding Clooney. He's been guarding me. I didn't even register who this guy was, and here he was. He was playing with guys from ER, and that's how they stayed in shape. They had a gym right there next to it. I saw Kurt Russell that same day. It was just this weird, surreal moment for me. I'm like, you know what? I've not really tapped into this. I've been with Shaka and I've met a bunch of musicians, but as far as the acting side goes, I've not been out and about. I haven't done it. And here I am now. I'm looking. Here's the dude from ER. Here's this guy from the Goldie Hawn's life, and all these different people. Urkel was there playing. Didn't even recognize Jaleel White, and he's playing basketball on the court. It's all these different mixes of people that were on TV or part of production crews that were there that liked to play ball, and it was pretty competitive ball. So it was kind of cool because after we got done playing, there guys were kind of standing around there talking, and that's how the whole Clooney thing happened. Was he came up and he said, "You guys are out of here, huh?" And the guys were like, "Yeah, we're heading back to New York," and they go, "Well, he's not with us." They pointed at me, "He's not with us." I said, "No, I work right over there." And I said, I leaned back and I'm like, "I'm right over there." And I pointed to the building, the adults building past the water tower. I'm like, "I work there." And he goes, "Well, when do you work?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm not with the team. I'm not with them. I just know Claxton." And I know that group, and so at that point in time, that's when, he knew the people that I knew, and he was like, well, "Wait a minute, you need to come back over here." I'm like, "Yeah, I can't. I don't have no way of getting in here. I have no credentials. I came in with them on this pass, and he got it set up, so I was able to go in. I don't forget if it was a patch or if it was a thing on my car, but I had a drive on past to Warner lot then. So I would go there every day early to go to work, and I would go meet with the guys, and we'd play basketball at 12:30 every weekday on the Warner lot, 12:30 p.m. That's when we'd play ball. And there's about 10 of us that would play, and it was always 4-on-4 because the court was small. But that's how the whole thing started with me. It was that real. Like, it was like I gave you all those details because there's no other way of explaining it. It's just the way that it worked out. And so by playing basketball in California, on the Warner lot, the people that I met, the doors that opened was kind of cool, but it was all basketball related. It wasn't Hollywood related. It wasn't anything but the game. That's really what it was. And that's what people don't understand is it never became any of that. I never had conversations with George Clooney going, I've got this idea. I've never had those kind of conversations with any of those guys. The only thing that I did do is I did work on some stuff for Will Smith when I was about that same time. Not long after that, I was doing storyboards for a buddy of mine that he's kind of like Will's ghostwriter. Like when Will would get scripts in, if they didn't like the script or whatever, they would make changes. And this guy was Will's ghostwriter. He would change the scripts to fit what Will thought would be better for, his side of things. I don't know. But I started doing storyboards for Will's. I did storyboards for Will's Video Miami and drew that out. Never got paid for that, by the way. But everything that I drew was in the video. It was kind of crazy. But it's the comic book rendition. For those that don't know what storyboards are, it's a comic book rendition, basically, of a production before you go into production. So you have camera angles and direction and that kind of thing. So yeah, that's what I was doing. And then, obviously things started changing once I started getting out into the world of acting and being around the production side and the money that's behind that, and realizing, wow, the networking that goes on with these people. I got invited to a party that I ended up in a red room. I didn't end up in the red room. I ended up walking down the hall past the red room, and I ended up at this party in this house where there's a red room party going on, and there's a normal party on the other end of the house. And all I can tell you is look up red rooms in Hollywood. There's a lot of like eyes wide shut stuff that went on. And when I left the bathroom and came back down the hall and looked in there and got the good look of what was going on, that's when I went and got the guy that invited me to the party. And I basically said, we need to go. And that was one of the moments that made me want to get out of Los Angeles. That was one of the moments that made me realize I don't want to be around this. The people that were at that party, I didn't know anybody there by face. but they were supposedly like big name producers, and their families were there. Even their kids were like at this other party, but there was a whole other party on the other side of the house, which was crazy to me. Uh, um,
It
to this
makes
day, the feeling, it's evil. It was evil. It was flat out evil, perverse, nasty. What I saw, I won't even go into detail on any of it, but it made me, it made my skin crawl. It's like something that you could, and even the music that was playing, the weird music, the weird music that was playing, just weird. It's like a circus. But anyway, but
yeah.
that made me decide to get out of it, to not ever go up into those hills again. Hollywood Hills is a crazy place.
I remember you. That was. I remember you telling me about that, and that was the moment that you got out of there, and you described it like the movie Eyes Wide Shut. So,
Yep.
which is
Yep.
pretty much the reference. If anyone has seen that movie, that's what he
Crazy.
experienced as he went down the hallway and looked into that room. And you know, that is
It was
my
creepy. The
in
feeling on
my
that though, Noel, was it was more than just like looking at something bad. It was a feeling, like the creepiest feeling I've ever, like, I don't know, man. I was almost like not even human.
So what Rick is describing there is my understanding of what goes on in Hollywood as well. And uh, I've told you guys that I just my encounters in Hollywood and my work around there as well is that I think that there's a lot of really so what he's describing is there's the Red Room party on the other end of this house that nobody knows about. At the same time, there's another party going on outside with children, hot dogs, pools, barbecues, that kind of stuff. All American type party. You would never suspect that on the other side of this house is the Red Room party.
Red Room
And
party.
and that's my understanding of Hollywood as well. That there's a lot of very normal people in it, if you want to call anyone normal there. But they're the boom operators, and they're just the cameramen, and they're just there working jobs as extras, or whatever, just
Those
living their
guys are
life.
not. Those guys are not at these parties. I don't believe those are the guys. I don't think that your cameras and your audio. I don't think guys from the crew are at
I,
these. I think this is your creatives and your stockholders. I really do. I think it's
yeah,
the stockholders more than anything.
yeah, and the question it's kind of like you said that it was more like a feeling you had of the evil.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I think that if you were in Hollywood enough, you would have to sit, unless if you have totally tuned yourself out, like numbed yourself, you would have to go, there's something very, I can't put my finger on it, but there's something very evil here. It's just very dark and sinister. Eventually you're
I
going to
agree.
feel that there, even as a normal person. But it's only people who are like, for whatever reason, Yah either allowed you to see that, or they were trying to push you to the next level of saying, can Rick, is he willing to be a part of this? And
I don't think the guy. No, because I don't think the guy that got invited. They didn't know that I was. In all fairness, the guy that took me to the party did not tell them he was coming to get me or that I was being invited. I know that that wasn't a setup for me. He was invited to the other party. That other
uh,
party that was going on was a whole different group of people. I'm telling you. I think it was the husbands of the women and the children that were at that party that were going down that hall. That's what I believe. I still believe that. I don't think any of the women that were at that party were a part of that. None of the kids were in that. That was not something that they were. There were not kids in that room. There was not even close. These were people that I believe that these people that had this house cared about those people. These are the kids that are not going to that kind of stuff. I don't even want to go down that road. Even
but
that there's kids involved. There's no kids involved. There were kids at that house. There were kids in that pool. There was only one kid in the house that I saw. And the reason why I only saw that one kid is just as I was going to the bathroom, and I had to go to the bathroom because this guy was talking to me forever. As I was going to go to that bathroom, a lady came in with a kid with the little swimmies on, running through the floor, and they went into that bathroom because some other kids were in the Cabana House bathroom. And that now all of a sudden I've got to go to the bathroom, and that's why the guy sent me down the hall to begin with, and that's how I saw the Red Room. It was because the hallway that I went down was this dark can light hall, but the lights were all dimmed, and as I got closer, that's when I could see the red like the red light coming out, and I could hear the music more. And I thought at first the music was like an overhead speaker, and then I realized no, it's coming out of this room that I'm coming up on. And when I went past it, I saw, I'm like, did I just see a bunch of naked people doing a bunch of crazy stuff? Because I was kind of walking fast. And I'm like, I know I saw it. And I was sitting there going to the bathroom going, what in the world is going on here? Wait a minute. And I'd never seen anything like that, ever, never. And when I remember I was washing my hands, and I remember looking at myself in the mirror going, dude, where are you right now? What is going on? Who are these people? What is going on? I just remember thinking, you got to get out of here. And I remember opening the door, and I remember going down the hallway, and I remember thinking of the movie, the song Hotel California was going through my head. I remember thinking that the song, the lyrics, it's like, welcome to the Hotel California. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh. And then like I said, when I went past there again, I did take a look, like I did see that, like, no way. Everything in there was red. Everything in that room was red. The creepiest thing. So, but when we left, like when I told the guy what was going on, he went, what? He's like, he couldn't believe it. But when we were sitting at the stop sign at the bottom of the hill, once we got down to the bottom of the hill, he was like, dude, we should go back. And that's when I was like, no, man. It's the last time I ever talked to that guy. I was like, nah, I think I'm just going to go ahead and get out of the car. And I got out on Sunset. I think it was Sunset. And I walked all the way down. I walked down to where the strip really was. And I went down there, and I think I went into either Red Rocks or the Comedy Store and grabbed a Coke and called another buddy of mine. He came over and met me, and we hung out there for a little bit. It was Comedy Store. We were hanging out behind the Comedy Store. And we hung out there for a little bit until I went home. We went home. But it was crazy. That was my real. You're right. You're right, though, Noel. That was one of the moments that after, because I'd already been out of radio, I'd already been looking at the city itself. I'd already been looking at the ocean. I'd already had some weird things happen to me out there, and Shaka had warned me. She actually, I owe a lot to Yvette Stevens. I owe a lot to Shaka Khan. She's the one that told me to get out of LA. She's the one that said, get out of here. This place is going to chew you up and spit you out. And I had just some crazy, crazy adventures, just close calls in the water to maybe close calls in the water. I don't know. But at the time I felt like they were close calls in the water to, just doing stupid stuff. And, when that happened, that's when it really hit me. I'm like, you know what? These people do not care about a whole lot. If they're going to do that kind of stuff in a room with each other, they're into some different kind of caring that I know. And like I said, it was so perverted and so perverse, and like I felt like it was evil. Like I felt like these people were like marionettes on a string, and somebody else was controlling them. It was just the weirdest thing. So all I can tell you is the feeling I got from that, plus the warnings to get out, was it didn't take much after that. I left.
Well, like I said, it was clearly, God allowed you to see that. That He allowed you to see that, so you knew that what you were truly in or about to get in, and that kind of stuff. But I will say really quickly, the guy you drove off, you got off at the stop sign and walked down the Sunset. You said you never talked to that guy again, right? The guy in the car.
No.
See, see, that's interesting because
because well, I mean, we didn't hang out again. We may have talked on the phone, but we didn't hang out again. And he's the one, we should go back. And I'm like, no, man. No.
Well, I brought that up because you've told the story to me before, and it was nice because I kind of like unjarred your memory there. Like I hadn't heard that before, that little detail. So that was the first time I'd heard that. So tell us a little bit about that after hearing this really, dark tale and a horrible tale. Take us a little bit through your time like on the Universal lot before moving forward. You said you couldn't. Man. You said you couldn't talk about some of it. So maybe there's something you can talk about.
Well, yeah, of course. So my roommate, how I met my roommate was through the whole Rosie thing through Shaka, because he was at Universal, and that whole group that went out, he and I met, and that's when we realized, okay, wow, it was just crazy timing. He's like, he was looking for a roommate, I was looking for a place, and I couldn't find any place I liked, and he had a house, not an apartment complex or a condo, and I didn't want to live in an apartment or condo, and he had this cool job. He could go bird dog. That's what his job was. His job was to find locations on the lot, He was the head of TV development. So if somebody called and said, "Hey, we're looking for a place to shoot a chase scene on foot, it needs to be, on the lot somewhere. Can you go?" That's who he would do, and he would see what it would take to do the shot. It would, you're going to need this kind of lighting. You're going to need this kind of, crane. You're going to need all this. So he was able to go anywhere he wanted to at any given time because all he had to say, "Well, so and so called me, and I'm going to find a location." So we would take golf carts out, and we would go into the like most remote areas of the lot. We would have golf cart races, but we would go after hours when nobody was around. Nobody was around. So I've been in the water with the shark with Jaws. I've been in that, not while it was running, but like swimming into that in that lake that you'd go to on the tour. I've jumped off the platforms at Water World at night, and then the next day we realized that one of us, we could have really gotten hurt because there's a cable that ran down. We didn't know. We jumped off the wrong side. If I hit the cable, we really got hurt bad, decapitated or cut up really bad. There was just so many, and that we did that all the time and never noticed it until one day we were looking like there's a cable right there. We'll never forget that. So yes, of course we would have cocktails back then. We would go to Dalt's Bar and Grill and have a few cocktails or get them to go, and we would have these little coolers packed, and we would go to Universal and take buddies and have 5 golf carts out at a time, so up to 10 people going out all over Universal Studios and hanging out and having cocktails and laughing and having a good time. And sometimes it smelled funny too. I got to admit that it did. It smelled funny back then, quite a bit actually. So it was just one of those things where we had access to do things that nobody did. Nobody was doing what we were doing, or we would have seen them. And we were, we're hanging out at where the clock tower is for Back to the Future, going into places in Jurassic Park. This was nightly. We could go there anytime we wanted. So we were literally on the set. There's a lake. There used to be a lake. I don't know if they still have it. There's like this lake where they filmed TLC's Waterfalls, where the girls looks like they're standing on water. It's where they filmed the Truman Show, I think, part of the Truman Show. We were there. The Great Outdoors, we were in that house. The best little house in Texas, we were in that house. We used to go to the Bates Motel and sit outside in the parking lot and act like we were staying at the Bates Motel, just like joking, like because you felt like you were literally at a hotel. And then you walk around the corner and there's Mother up in the window. And we used to go up, get inside the barn, the house, the scary house on the hill in California. It held lawnmowers and weed eaters, if I remember correctly. It was really a barn. It looked like a house, but it was a barn. And the room that Mother was in was this tiny little, room. Like 2 guys could get in there barely and maybe take a selfie with Mother. And it was just a dummy. There was no face to it or anything. It was just this old chair sitting there and this dummy mannequin in this dirty little room at the top of the stairs.
Technically, she was a skeleton anyway. So in the movie, at least.
Right. Yeah. But it was like that scene was not filmed in that house, that room, that scene where it shows the Mother or whatever. If it ever shows, I can't remember if it shows her face. But that wasn't even filmed there. That wasn't even filmed in that room. That was a whole different. That was on a set. So it was really weird to see all these things because it really made me realize the impact that Hollywood can have on us and realize how fake and faux the whole thing is. Even like where the Munsters house was, you realize it's not even a whole house. The only full house I think that was on the lot, a true full-blown house, was the house that was the best lore house in Texas. And that was like on a curve. And that was a full-blown home. Like the rooms were all still intact. It was a full-blown house. And they filmed a lot of things there, not just that movie. But that particular home was, I think, the only full-blown house at the time that I can remember that was on the lot. Everything else was like the faux front, and then they had multiple uses in the back, storage to, just these small little fronts that looked like houses, and they weren't. Especially the Westerns. But the park is different than the lot, where they shoot the movies was different than just Universal Studios, like where the backdraft thing is. I mean, they don't have sound stages. I don't think there's any sound stages that close to the park just because of sound itself. But like the backdraft, if I remember correctly, that was its own little hangar. Same thing with Back to the Future ride. That was like a sound stage type building where you'd ride. I think you rode in the DeLorean, like 4 or 5 people wide. and it made it feel like you were, you were in an IMAX theater type of setting with
Yeah,
hydraulic.
it was like Star Tours, but in front of an IMAX screen.
Yes, yes. And if you like really stretched your neck out and looked, you'd see like 20 different cars or whatever, 10 cars lined up doing the exact same experience as you at the same time. It was crazy. But yeah, was it magical? Was it, what did you get this really cool feeling? Yeah, of course, man. I was living the dream. I was living everything that everyone could ever imagine, like what you'd want to do. I had access to it. And EJ and I said this all the time when we were living there. It's like people have no idea. Like we don't even know. There's no way we even realize what we've got. And the YouTube would have been around by then. You guys, I would have never been a flat earther. Probably, I would have never been woken up, and we would have been probably guys that were on that first swing because we had access to everything. I had drive on to Warner. He had drive on and backstage passes basically to everything VIP you could think of at Universal. And I mean everything. I mean, we could walk in, just grab a golf cart and go anywhere we wanted to go. Anywhere we wanted to go. And we did. Like we were there all the time. We did it. We did it all the time because we knew it's short lived. This is not going to last. This part of our lives is not going to last forever. And I kid you not, there's probably 2-3 times a week, especially in the summer, that we would go do that. And I got off the air at 1:00 in the morning, and we were hanging out over at Universal over at the lot by 1:30, 1:45. As long as I got my production done, I could get out the door and be gone. And we did it all the time because he didn't have to be in at work till like 11:00 in the morning. So it was like we were on the same schedule. So it was great. It was great. Plus, we had a really cool little house. We had a 3-bedroom, 2-bath home in the valley in Reseda on Yolanda Avenue with this awesome pool. And it was close enough to the neighbor's house that I could run off of their roof and dive into our pool. Got that on video, actually. Just fun stuff. When I look back, it's like, I lived a crazy. You're right. Yeah, I lived a kind of a crazy life. A lot of wild experiences. I mean, yeah, and I look at it, it's no big deal to me because nobody's better than anybody, but I can understand maybe that's what happened is because I got into radio and it's like, you have to, it's just a job. These people are just doing the same thing that you're doing. They're singing all the time. You're the one that's introducing all the records all the time. You're there every night. Back then, radio jocks were the link to the stars, to the local people, to the local markets. You're the guy that's interviewing them for the people. You're the guy that's, got their numbers. You're the guy that's, hanging out with them, getting the pictures for the trade magazines before the internet. I mean, I was in radio when you were still using reel to reel for your phone calls. Not long after I was in radio, they started doing the digital machines. But before that, man, I was old school radio. I was working cart decks, reel to reel machines, and occasionally, sometimes you'd have to break out the albums because you couldn't find the song you needed on a cart or on a cassette or CD.
Now,
So
when you
got to see the last one of those.
So you got to see, the superficial end of Hollywood, how it was all fake, and then you saw some of the dark underpinnings. By the time 9/11 came along, you were still doing DJ work, and you were on the East Coast then, I believe, if I recall. Was it?
Yes, Charlotte.
Yeah, Charlotte, North Carolina.
Yep.
And then so with time we have left, I mean, we could cover a number of things, but what brought you back to what made you yearn? I mean, because you're talking about how that if YouTube were around when you were all in Warner Brothers lot, Universal lot, DJing, that kind of stuff, that you never would have come to the flat Earth and so on and so forth.
Probably not.
What was it? What was it in your life that started having you yearn for the truth? Because you're one of those guys. Whenever we talk on the phone, you're always just always wanting to know, like, what am I looking into, and and things that you're looking into. And
well, first of all, the seed was planted when I was a kid. My grandpa and my grandma on my mom's side, they both went through the Depression, and my grandpa was also in World War II. He was overseas in World War II. There were things that were talked about as a kid. There were hardships. There were things that my mom's side, with Mom and Papa, they literally came from very humble beginnings, like from the hollers of Kentucky. And they had to move north where there was work at the time, prior to World War II even. And so when my grandpa went into World War II, once he was in the fight and this and that, he experienced so much that by the time that Vietnam came, and then of course I was born in 71, late 71. By the time I turned 16, my grandpa had a lot to tell me. And we had one day to like find all this information out. And so um, everything that he told me at that particular time was the one time. But he was my mama and my papa were always instrumental in their strong faith in God and Christ. And that was one thing that I could never take away. And like I said, the seeds were planted early on. Um, did I fall away from that? Yes, of course I did. I grew up in the 80s, 70s, and 80s and 90s. I was an adult male by the time 1990 hit. So, here we are, we're looking at this whole perspective of, when did I come back to God? Well, it wasn't that I didn't come back to God, it's that I backslid. Even in LA, one of the things that I would say, I always said this on my radio shows. It's funny, we talked about this, calling it Hanging with Hummer. That was my radio moniker. That was my radio show, Hanging with Hummer show, Hanging with Hummer. That's how I'd say it. It's 7:03, Hanging with Hummer. Get ready. 45 minutes of nonstop hits coming at you next. And then going to commercials. And so when I look at this and I go, wow, this has been a journey. Um, I was the guy that thought, oh, I can get into radio and I can change it. I can make the world know Jesus and I can sneak Jesus in on the world. And I was so naive. And little did I know is no, man, you're getting poisoned slowly. You're backsliding slowly. Your faith. I was the kid that went to church camp and took it serious when we were talking about Jesus. Then I'd get home and I was the kid that was also, probably saying cuss words, riding my bike down the railroad tracks with the kids, running around out on Mini Mountain back in the day. So when I look back, it's like, what happened with me? I started seeing the evil. I started seeing how real it was and how embedded it was and how it controlled our culture, how the record labels were using the people through what Shaka had told me, through what I had heard from other artists that I'd met through the years, through how I saw how they would just go through artists that would be one hit wonders or people trying to make it. They would send these people out on these little tours, and these people could hardly put food in their bellies if it wasn't for the label finally paying for their food. But the people that got ripped off, I started seeing that. But seeing the lifestyle in Hollywood, seeing the actual way that things were done, even in New York. I went to the Grammys one year with Shaka. She played the opening. She did the opening with like Bonnie Raitt and a bunch of women of rock. And they opened the Grammys one year. And that was the same year that when we were there in New York, I realized, I'm like, man, these people are all about what do we have to offer. There's never like, hey, how's your family? What was it like growing up? What's your favorite things to do? There was never this connection, this touchability, this relatability. It was always just this, what can you do for us? Here's your money. Just continue to do what you're doing. And as long as it was worldly, of course, there were opportunities. It's no joke. I never had anybody come to me and say, hey, we got somebody that we want you to meet. And it turns out to be the devil. And I was offered to sell my soul. Never had anything like that happen. I believe that people have had encounters with that. If somebody says they've had an encounter like that and you've seen their life change and you saw what they were doing before, I would believe that person. I would believe that person did get a chance to make a different decision and come to know the Lord. And as far as me coming to know the Lord and coming back to it, it was a domino effect, Noel. It was seeing things out there. It was my life. It was my own decisions. It was my own walk. It was my own um, discoveries as far as what I was able to listen to and want to see. And I truly believe that me losing my dad, I was married once before. I was actually married when I lived in South Carolina. Um, and I filed for divorce on my 2-year anniversary. I had hired a PI and caught some things while I was taking care of my dad. And it was an awful experience. Everybody in my family knew I shouldn't have gotten married. Everybody tried to warn me. And the second day of my honeymoon, I was in Jamaica calling my sister at her work number. I'll never forget it. And I told her, I said, what have I done? And she went, oh, Ricky. And I could hear it in her voice. She's like, we wanted to tell you, we couldn't tell you. And it was just these these mistakes that I had made for myself, not listening and not going into decisions prayerfully. It was almost like I finally hit rock bottom, losing my dad, watching my dad die, holding his hands while he died, and going basically shortly thereafter, going through a really messy divorce when it didn't have to be at all. It cost me of getting my dad's farm. It cost a lot of things, and God had a plan in all of it. And every bit of it led to me meeting my wife, having these beautiful children, and having a life that I never thought that I was going to have. And I'm happy. I've been able to do research. I've been able to help other people out with podcasts. I've been able to give my time. I'm doing the best that I can to raise my children. And every day I'm thankful that God is allowing me to take breaths in and breaths out. And it's all because he paid a price. He came and he did exactly what he said he was going to do, and he's going to fulfill every bit of the prophecies, every bit of it. Someday there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth, and everything that's in me, everything that I've experienced, the reason why I'm alive today is because of him, because of him being graceful enough to allow me to live. That I'm grateful enough to appreciate it, and just I can't. I could never work my way into heaven by my own will, by my own actions. It's my reverence for God, my fear of the Lord that has changed me. And it was within when I realized that you have to have a reverence for God, a reverence for the Lord, that I realized that all these decisions, all these things that I'd experienced, even the fun stuff that was, didn't hurt anybody, but that was all related to being there so that the world had rewards. If I didn't work for a Viacom, if I didn't work or have a buddy that worked for Universal, we wouldn't be having those rewards of golf carts in the back lot of Universal. We wouldn't be hanging out inside of backdraft, not know if the thing is going to go off or not, and where's the fire coming from, just doing really dumb stuff where we shouldn't have been in certain places while things were active. Um, Climbing up things, we shouldn't have done these things. Could have died in car accidents in LA. I about drowned when I was 4.5 years old. My dad saved my life, pulled me out of the bottom of a lake. Just all these little things that I've experienced, and usually I have had a witness. The problem is most witnesses don't want to talk, and that's where this whole project is that I'm working on outside the Roland is. I really think that this all needs to be on record. It's much more important than a movie, considering that all these people are witnesses to things that I've experienced. And I'm nobody, man. I am a nobody. I am no different than the next guy down the road. I mean, I'm no better than anybody. I'm the worst person I know because I don't know anybody like I know me. I know my own thoughts. I know how abusive I can be to myself. I know how I can grumble under my breath that I shouldn't be doing. There's times I use words I shouldn't be using. There's all kinds of things, thoughts, processes, hope, not surrendering to God. I mean, you name the list. I struggle just like anybody else. I struggle every day knowing Rob's gone. Rob, I miss Skiba so much. People don't even realize how much I miss that guy. How many times I wish in the last, almost it'll be 2 years in October. You don't even know how many times I wish I could call this guy during the week going, got a question, dude. And I can't do that. It's just a really weird thing. And there's other friends that I've lost since then too. I've lost other friends after these COVID shots, guys that have taken shots. I've lost friends that way. And I think the biggest thing that anyone takes from all this is, yes, I've had this worldly life. It's been this fun thing. I've had Duke Boys moments. I've had MacGyver moments. I've had A-Team moments. I've had all these moments. And I looked at the stars just like everybody else did when I was a kid, thinking I'm going to go to a galaxy far, far away someday. And, in all of this and everything that I've learned, the biggest thing that I can see, especially in the days that we're in right now, the time that we're in right now, there's never been a more important time than having a relationship right with God, a relationship with Christ. And I know this whole conversation leading up to this was not about him at all. But there's a reason why it has led to it now. It's because all of those things that I talked about, none of them would bring happiness. None of them would bring joy. None of them would bring an inner peace like God can. And knowing that He's got control of all this, there is nothing that's going to happen that He doesn't ordain. He is the one that ordains it. It has to go down this way. This is His story. No matter where we are on the clock, no matter where we go, the end result, the end goal that any of us should have, and I think I said this last time when we were on, is the main goal in all of this is that people understand that you are the soul. You're the soul. and you're going to spend eternity somewhere, and you want to spend it with him. You want to spend it with the one that made all this possible. Whether it's a millennial reign or whether it's not a millennial reign, it doesn't matter right now. What the main goal is know him, because you can take your last breath at any given moment. One thing that I've seen in the last 3 years is how precious life is and how easily it can be taken away and quickly. And if it can, what in the world does Universal Studios backlot have to do with anything? Nothing. Nothing. Has absolutely no meaning in my life now. Nothing. Was it experiences? Yeah. Were they cool? Were they fun? Yeah. Could I have had the same amount of fun, out here on a four-wheeler? Yeah. I could have had the same exact kind of fun, just a different location. So what the eyes were taken in and the aura of this place, the magnificent, cinematic magic behind it that made it so cool that, yes, would it have been cool for other people to have seen and enjoy? Yeah, it would have. It would have been really cool. It would have been great for some of my buddies I grew up with out here to have experienced some of the stuff that I did. A couple of them got to do it, but when they came out to visit. But it's just one of those things where we're gonna take our last breath, and I don't know about you, but I've seen a lot of people sick, and I've seen a lot of people die, and I don't think that we've seen the last of it. And my biggest thing is that I want to be welcomed into the kingdom. And I know that I've got plenty of work to do, and I know that I could never work my way in, but I know that there's plenty for us to yet to do. And maybe the Rolan project is something that I need to do. Maybe this other project that we're talking about starting, because it would be a quicker way of getting some things out and done, and cheaper and a lot easier to produce. Maybe that could help lead people. Maybe you're all the work that you're doing, Noel, you're giving people confirmation or giving people things to think about and look up and research, so that they're not leaning into their own understanding and they can question all things and question the spirit behind all things. And that's our job. That's our job here. Our job is not to have all these worldly rewards. Now, can you enjoy things of this world? Can you enjoy your family and your children? And can you enjoy the things like your garden, and can you enjoy your car? I think that's between you and God. I think that's between of where you're at in your walk. That's got nothing to do with me. It's not my job to judge that. My only thing is, I hope people understand that in the time that we're in, the number one thing is, if you can't look around and see that we've got a clock that seems to be going a lot faster now. Just get your relationship right with the Lord. Get your relationship right with the one and only, and understand that, and but also have worship with people, get with other people, sing songs to the Lord, do things with people. None of us have it down perfect. None of us are perfect. None of us have it all figured out. None of us do. None of us can sit here and go, I've got God's playbook. I've got it, and I've got it memorized. Page 52 says this. None of us have his playbook memorized or done. The biggest thing is we just have to be ready and willing, and we better be ready and prayerfully covered before we take that last breath. And it could happen at any given moment. And that's kind of what Rob and I were talking about at the end of that Take on the World conference. Is one of the things he said, I got to get back to my first love. I got to get back to loving the Lord for everything that we do have, and being appreciative. I'm like, you're right, man. Because if we're so busy doing this and doing that and doing this and doing that, where's our real relationship at with God? Where's our time spent with him? So ultimately, start your day with him, end your day with him, and spend some time with him during the day. Spend time with him during the day. Have that quiet time. Have that conversation, or listen time, or prayer time, or read scripture time. And I'm guilty of it. I'm just as guilty of it as the next person. And this is, this show today may have been the whole reason that my words I'm saying right now are to be used to convict me for my own words. So, it's cool to go back in time and look at all these things. And we didn't even talk about all the weird stuff that happened, Noel, after, even flat earth stuff happened, the things that started happening with me. So, I mean, I don't even know if it needs to be said, because ultimately the biggest thing that everybody needs to hear is we've got to have a relationship with our Father. We've got to have a relationship with our Messiah. We've got to have a relationship with the one that started all of this and who will finish all of this. And And how do we do that? And I really truly believe it's in complete humility, not of the world, and really focused on the things that matter most, and that is what he would have us do and what would be his will for our lives. And I'm glad and I'm thankful that I left Los Angeles. I'm glad and thankful that I left Charlotte. I'm glad and thankful that I left other places that I'd been before. And I'm glad that God used every experience I ever had to lead me to the path to connect with my wife, to have the life and the experience that I'm having right now. And I've never been at more peace, even here in the last few months, um, just with everything. I'm at peace. Um, does it still bother me where we're at? Does it still concern me what could happen with my family because we don't follow the protocols and all the nonsense of what the media tells us to do? Um, I can't dwell on it. I can only be as prepared as I can be. I'm not going to go live on some island far, far away from everybody and not be ready to serve the Lord in some capacity. I guess I just want to be prepared, and I think spiritually preparedness is very essential right now because I think we've all been a little worn down a little bit in the last few years.
That was an epic rant. That was really, really good, Rick. And I could comment on so much of what you just said. But when you just finished there saying we were all worn down, I mean, that when I look at when I look at myself in the mirror and then I see a
Mm-hmm.
picture of myself just from like 4 or 5 years ago, I'm like, wow, like it's like COVID, when COVID came, that was like get into the trenches, get the
Mm-hmm.
machine gun, we're at war, everything I was trained for, this is it. And it definitely, yeah, it wore a lot of us down. But that was
Oh yeah.
really good.
I think that's what it all comes down to is it's not about me, man. It's about him. And I think all of our stories can connect somehow, just like you were talking about how we connected, and certain things that I use to plant seeds for you to journey down this direction and that direction. We're constantly testing things, but I think we need in the midst of finding out all this information, we better make sure that we're spending the time with him first, because it's really easy for us to go down avenues without his guidance. um, Sometimes our shoes can turn into rollerblades and we can go downhill and not realize that we're doing it and say we all the way down, and we're going the opposite direction he would really want us to be going, and that is our relationship. We got to focus more on him than anything, and I'm guilty of that. I am saying this is for me more than anybody else that's listening. But if it correlates to your life, great. If it means hey, wow, I've been thinking this, now I'm hearing Rick say it, well, then use that as confirmation, if so be it. Your ears just heard it. So you know um, I I would hope that if anybody's listening, no matter what your life has been like, no matter what it is, you're here right now. Tomorrow's a new day. How are you going to start your day? And I challenge each and every one of us, including myself, and I hope that we're all encouraged that, hey, we're all still breathing, we're all still here. And there's nothing better than having time with my creator. Nothing better. Nothing better with having him with my Messiah and spending time and listening and being quiet and being still. And I've been a motor mouth, so I apologize.
No, that was really good. And I don't even know where to go from there because that was so good. And I was thinking, when you were talking about Skiba and the last conversation you guys had together at Take on the World, and you had come on TUC. We did kind of like a podcast thing, and we were talking about the mud flood, the Millennial Kingdom, that kind of stuff. And we were planning to do more. I was planning to bring you on, and then that happens, and it kind of just like it was almost like, well, what now type of thing. I was just thinking how much has changed. It's been like over 2 years since you've been on, and how much has changed just in the last 2 years, and all that we've
Yeah.
been through. And but
Yeah.
it's been great to have you on. And and I hope you realize that one of the reasons that I find your story so fascinating, and going through this is, we're not giving praise to Hollywood culture or anything like that, but here I have before me a man who was in it, and you went through it and you saw it and you came out, and where you were one of the most instrumental, even from behind the scenes. As you said before, you don't have a YouTube channel, but you were at the right place at the right time and instrumental with Skiba, and a huge influence on him, and to bring many people to Ya. And so uh,
That's
that's
humbling.
well, yeah, well, that's one of the reasons that I'm so fascinated by your story and all that you've been through, and the journey you've taken, and your how you perceive the spiritual world, because of your experiences. Like, we didn't even get into tonight, like the orbs you would see and different things like that. All these different experiences that leads you to where you're at now and how you think, and the decisions you've made.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
it is after 9 o'clock East Coast time right now, and I can't top that, because that was such a good conclusion. And I thank you for coming on. And we'll have to
Anytime.
try. We'll have to try it again sometime. We'll have to plan in the future, maybe for good weather. Maybe we could go do like a live Lake Michigan, test of
You
Chicago
just
or
need to
something.
come up. You need to come up in the fall or the spring when the air temperature and the water temperature is similar. Man, the past 2 nights though, let me look out. Let me see if it cooled off. If the air cooled off enough, and it seems like the wind died down. But I don't know what was the deal with the haze. It's you know what? I can go out here right now. Now, does everybody remember what it looked like earlier with the haze?
Well, the sun looked really. I mean, I could see the sun looked really hazy.
Yeah. So now it's kind of calmed down a little bit. It's still a little breezy. Man, it is chilly here. Whew. I got on shorts and a hoodie, and I'm chilled. It's been a weird summer so far. I'm not gonna lie. So now you can see. Remember, I said there's a house back here. That's a half a mile, and then the tree line is a mile and a half. Maybe they don't look the same. Maybe they're actually more grayed out now that I'm seeing them. No, I can see this tree line. They can see that line better now. That's a mile and a half away. That tree line back there, and then
I think I could
that
see a
house is
little
a half a
better.
mile. Yeah, there's just a dark green line on the horizon line. Those are trees in the background through the fields. But earlier, I don't think you could really see them. But it's cleared up a little bit. But it's still hazy enough. You wouldn't see Chicago tonight. You wouldn't see it. I don't believe. Maybe infrared you would maybe. But yeah. So
Well, you have
this is what
asked.
I've been doing. I've been doing gardening, man. I've been putting in my garden, raising my kids, and putting in plants, and trying to be prepared and being a good husband at the same time, and coaching my kids and living life, man.
Well, I'm going to say for the viewer real quick, and we're going to end this. We're going to wrap this up here real quick, and then we can go to the after party and just kind of talk. Every single time I talk to Rick, he's always like working on his house, and he's out like we're having this deep conversation. He's out like mowing the lawn, or I don't know. He's got like clippers out or something, or like weed whacker. I don't know. He's always like out doing stuff and working, and
Or doing puppet stuff, because that's what I do. I do puppet
yeah.
stuff for commercials, for TV commercials now, which is kind of funny. So, oh,
All
what
right.
do I know?
Well, I need to take your invite and go up there one time. The last time I remember Take on the World, the last one that the Rob attended when he got
Yeah,
sick. You guys all got sick. You really wanted me to come to that, and you asked me to like get a place with you, and we were gonna like stay there.
Airbnb.
Yeah, we're gonna
We're
Airbnb
gonna
it,
Airbnb. Yeah, we're gonna Airbnb it, man.
and I really consider it, and I think back on that like, man, what if I had gone or whatever. So I don't know. One of these times, I'll have to take you up on that offer and head up there, and I want to visit you and Chris and Liz Bailey as well up there. So, they're
Definitely, anytime, bro. Got room for you. We
all
got
right.
room for you. Come on up. And then you guys got an RV too, don't you? You guys travel in an RV at all?
It's a fifth wheel, which is
Oh, that's right.
it doesn't travel
No.
as well as an RV. So, RV would be much better for cross country trips. We usually just park it down in Florida. But anyways, Is there anything else you wanted to add, Rick, before we officially close this tonight?
No, if anybody has any questions or anything or whatever, I mean, I'm more than willing to answer anything that I possibly can. I know we didn't do there. We didn't go through half the stuff that we've talked about before, but all that stuff, like I said, I think maybe there's a reason why tonight. Maybe the biggest thing is tonight is just so that you guys can understand. I've lived the life, done it, been there, done that. Grew up in a terrible environment as a kid. Part of the time, that was something we didn't really tackle, which is good. But I grew up like most kids in the 70s and 80s. You know, it was a whole different culture, and kids were running wild. But so were some of the parents. I'll leave it at that. My dad was never that way. My stepdad was kind of a wild guy, Yahoo, back in the day, and that was not a fun time in my life. That I think is what really pushed me to become a class clown. That made it easier for me to be in radio and easier. It's kind of weird how these things all go full circle. That's my point. So again, the last thing I can say is thank you for having me on, and definitely, you know, just prayerfully we go day by day, one moment at a time, and one lesson at a time.